So we've got some lovely weather again. There might be some snow. It's arrived a couple of weeks earlier than it normally does, but we've got some nice blue skies, and despite what people say about it being dark for longer in Finland, when we do have sunlight, it can be very, very bright blue skies, and the white snow reflects things. By things, I mean the light. So I've not come to talk to you about that. What I have come to talk to you about is a video that I watched this morning, and I don't tend to do this at all, which is like react to other people's videos, but in this case it just had to be done. And the video in question was one that Richard Vobes posted today, so that's Thursday, what is it, the 2nd of November 2023. And it was, the title was something on the lines of an alternative to the Great Reset. And it featured this guy who, like me, used to be a teacher. So what this guy was proposing, he kept on going on about post-capitalism. So for me, that's always a dead giveaway, because that was a title of a book written by a bloke called Paul Mason, who used to be a BBC and Channel 4 journalist. And basically Mason's a Marxist. And like this guy, he calls what we currently have and the mess that we're currently in, he blames it all on this thing that he calls capitalism, which is basically too much private enterprise and too little government. The stuff you might have heard in the past about, oh, capitalism isn't working for us, all it's doing is creating massive profits for big corporations. Part of that is of course true. Big corporations are making, some of them are making big profits, and some of them aren't, but the ones who are often making big profits on the basis of government regulations which stop new entrants from coming into a market, and it allows those big corporations to get away with high rip-off prices. And that isn't the fault of private enterprise or free market capitalism. It's the fault of government, who erect those huge barriers to entry that protect their cronies. The cronies being the people that run these businesses, the people who are at the top of these crime families who appoint the puppet politicians that we suffer from. So to blame the exploitation that comes about through this, what Mussolini called fascism, the union of corporate power and big government, he called that fascism, he's right, the union of state with corporate power, on free market capitalism is just mad. And to say that we need something else other than capitalism is also mad, because what we currently have now is nothing like free market capitalism. First thing to say is that in true free market capitalism, there is private ownership. We don't have private ownership really in the UK at the moment, for the reasons I'll explain. First off, let's just take home ownership. Do you even really own your home when you have to pay £2,000 a year in council tax? That's what I was paying to live in a small 3-bedroom semi-detached house in Guildford. That's not ownership. You don't own that house at all, because unless you pay Guildford Council that £2,000, it's probably more than this now, that £2,000 a year in council tax, they'll take that asset off you. So you don't really own it. You know, then we've got all the various green regulations that are coming in. So unless you update your house and put a heat pump in it, or just basically dance to their tune, they'll fine you. And ultimately, governments work by threatening people, by taking them into hostage. People with big sticks turn up at your door. Does that sound like ownership to me, or does that sound like slavery? For me, it sounds definitely like slavery. The same also applies for private businesses. Unless private businesses obey government's rules and regulations, business owners can get thrown in jail, and they do get thrown in jail, or their business gets basically taxed out of existence. So we don't live in a capitalist society, right? To blame what we currently have on free market capitalism is completely either stupid or disingenuous. So in this interview with Vobes, this teacher guy is talking about what he wants in the future, which is basically more centralized power, more big government power. So he starts talking about some absolutely crazy, straight out of the book Marxism, that wages should be set by some sort of central authority, you know, basically the government, and the government must decide about the value of a teacher's wages relative to a doctor's wages. So as you can probably tell, like, my blood is boiling at this point. You know, because again, it's like either naivety or it's something more sinister. Like, if you give governments huge amounts of power and also the ability to collect huge amounts of money through legalized theft, which is what taxation is, what type of person is going to be attracted into politics? Is it going to be really nice people, or is it going to be people who are attracted by money and power? So this guy, yeah, he sort of announces himself, I've got some alternatives to the Great Reset. The actual truth of the matter is that his policy solutions actually sounded an awful lot like Klaus's plans for some sort of form of fascism, some sort of union of state with corporate power, or maybe actually more accurately, some form of technocracy. So what this guy was essentially advocating for, I don't think he, to be honest with you, I think he was just a bit clueless, really. He'd maybe read Paul Mason's Post-Capitalism book and some other sort of pseudo-Marxist sort of books. And that's where he was getting his ideas from. And what he was actually suggesting is this thing called technocracy. And in a technocracy, the economy is run by a team of bureaucrats or technocrats. And they decide things like how much people are going to be paid in one job compared to another job. You know, so in a technocracy, it's central planners that decide how much teachers get paid relative to doctors, which is exactly what he was describing. He was describing a technocratic system. And technocracy is what they had in the Soviet Union. It's basically what communist, centrally planned economies, that was their operating system. Same, obviously, for the fascist, centrally planned economies. So, you know, for example, the tiny German moustache man, he didn't believe in market forces. You know, he wasn't some libertarian who believed that markets should set wage rates. No, 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 no. He believed that it was up to the Tord Institute or National Socialist bureaucrats to make those decisions. So what we're looking at here is tyranny. Yeah, that's what we're looking at. And this guy, you know, his idea that there is an alternative to the Great Reset, and the alternative is my technocracy rather than Klaus's. Well, I'm really sorry, but that doesn't wash. Essentially, what this guy's arguing is that I don't like Klaus's tyranny. You don't like Klaus's tyranny. Oh, let's have some other form of tyranny. I'll be at the top of it, and I promise that my team of central planners won't exploit you. They won't take away your freedoms. You know, if you actually believe that, you're incredibly naive. We can't trust any of these people who want to control other people. You know, even if they say, oh, look, you know, he's doing a terrible job, but if you give me all this power, then I'll use it in a nice way. This is not the solution. Swapping one tyrant for another is not the answer. And I put it to you that we can't trust any of these people that put their hand up in the air and say, me, I'm going to sort it all out for you. Oh, you know, and they'll tell you some things that are true, like, you know, commercial banks lend money into existence, they charge interest on it, they rip people off. But their solution is stuff like, oh, let me be in charge of money and I won't rip you off. Well, even if that person was 100% trustworthy and honest and a decent person, which I'm telling you they won't be, because no decent person wants to control others, even if that person was decent, they would be quickly replaced by some psychopath who wanted that power to advance their interests rather than yours. So what's the solution then? You know, For me, the solution is something that we've not tried, or we haven't tried for like nearly 100 years. And that is for me and you to run our own lives rather than relying on some mummy government to do it for us. So for many people, they won't like this. They quite like the idea of the current system, or maybe some fairy story that the current system might be run by a better technocrat. And they quite, so many of them quite like the idea of a welfare state, that it's moral for them to live off other people's output, and for them to just sit at home and contribute diddly squat to society. The system that I'm proposing is one where there are private property rights. So no more things like council tax. Governments are not able to tax businesses and basically confiscate their assets using regulations. This is massively important because unless we have private property rights, there's no incentive for people to serve their fellow man or woman, because they just think, well, what's the point? If I do create something, 51% of the population will just vote in a government and on a manifesto to steal it from people like me to give it to people like to people like them. So in that society, you just get a collapse of incentives to set up businesses, incentives to work hard, incentives to build a better society. All of that goes out of the window when you don't have private property rights, which is what we have today. So the welfare state, all of that has to go. State is not to be trusted to provide healthcare, education, and like 90% of government activity has to go. The only thing that I would keep is law and order and national defence. Absolutely everything else goes. Entrepreneurs can build roads, people can be charged tolls, or maybe communities can set up privately owned cooperatives to build infrastructure. And it's collectively owned by people, but it's collectively owned privately. So psychopaths can't use the democratic system to grab hold of the levers of power and nick hold and steal these assets. In Finland, we have a lot of associations, private associations. So groups of people, they get together, nothing to do with the government, nothing to do with the local council, and they just get together, they privately own things, and they make things nice, like these signs and footpaths. This is all done by the private sector. In terms of money, the last thing that we need is what this guy's kind of suggesting, which is the government or one of its proxies ends up with a monopoly over the supply of money, right? Because psychopaths aren't going to be attracted by the amount of power that would be locked into a system like that, are they? You know, like, come on. So again, the alternative is competing private currencies. So you could have gold, silver, Bitcoin, anything can act as money. There's four functions of money. Maybe I'll do a video about this, but in the past, we have had private currencies circulating and competing in human history. We can go back to that. Interest rates should be set by the market, so supply and demand. So for example, if you've got a shocking credit history and you approach a private bank, they can assess your risk profile. There's no bailouts from government because government doesn't get involved in that. All it does is provide law and order. There are no banking regulations because the good politicians cannot be trusted with that amount of power. Instead, what we have to move to is a system based on individuals taking responsibility for their money that they've earned. And they can either decide to keep it at home, they can put it in a bank, but it's up to them to do their due diligence and find out what the bank is doing with their money. You know, that's a good way of also encouraging more ethical behavior. Like if you're not, you know, you have a responsibility to find out what your bank is doing with your money. And you can't just point the finger at somebody else. This is a massive problem in society. For far too long, far too many people have turned a blind eye and they've not taken responsibility for things that they should have taken responsibility for. So what did this guy get right? Well, he got one thing right, is that we don't want Klaus Schwab's Great Reset. We do not want his, in some ways you can call it Marxist because it's based on big government, but actually it's probably more similar to a fascist technocracy. I've done a video about that about a year ago. We don't want that because that is hell on earth, where we have no freedom. We don't decide what we're going to be spending our money on. They decide. This guy, this former teacher, he had all like bangles on his hand and stuff like that. I'll forgive him for that, Personally, I believe that people should be allowed to spend the money that they've earned on whatever they want, including funny bangles or like funny hats or whatever. But what I don't want is to replace Klaus Schwab's Great Reset with something else that very closely resembles it. The solution to a technocracy is not another technocracy. I'm really sorry. Anyone that comes along and says, I don't like this technocracy, they're exploiting you, but give me the same amount of power or more and I'll do a better job. Sorry, I don't trust those people. Anybody who seeks out that power to control people is not to be trusted. And I don't trust this guy. I got a lot of very, very bad vibes off him. I've never sought to control people. And I don't like other people who try to control people. In a word, what I want is freedom. Freedom to say what I want, freedom to decide what I want to do for a living, freedom to set up a business, freedom to engage in any transaction with anybody. So everything is done on a voluntary basis, which is not what we have now. Yeah, what we have now is a lot of compelled exchange with the government, and if you don't do it, they fine you, and if you don't pay the fine, they throw you in jail, right? I don't want that. I don't want anybody telling me what I can and can't do. So for me, this fits in very nicely with my own sort of Christian beliefs, which is, God created us with free will. I'm also aware of the concept of natural law, and above all else, one thing that we should never ever do is harm other people. We need police and we need a legal system, but that's where the role of government begins and ends. And that's all I want to say today from the snowy Finnish forest. It's not particularly cold, it's only about 0, something like that. And basically the Finnish approach to winter time is, you wear sensible shoes to cope with the snow, where you wear some layers and you get out and you enjoy the weather, whatever it is. And for me at the moment, that would be my advice to Brits, is just get out, enjoy the nature, enjoy that freedom that you have. So that's all I want to say today, so God bless.